Hi everybody, welcome back to Enjoying Retirement and part 3, the final part of our spear gun build. Hope you've enjoyed it so far. Right now I am measuring what I need to cut out to put the buttstock on. So I measured how deep the hole is, the diameter of the hole, lined it up, and now I've taken it back to the workshop, and I'm going to use a Japanese saw and just cut around where I think the diameter of that is going to be. That's so that when I bring the chisel to it, the pieces can flake right off down to the cut line without risk of damaging the rest of the wood. So I use a chisel to get the bulk of the wood off, and then I'm going to put it sideways and use a rasp. That's a Farrier's rasp. Comes in great for hogging wood off, and also has a finer side for some finishing work. I used it for traditional bow making, and it is excellent. Let's test fit the buttstock, and we've got it. All right, now we're going to round over the edges to keep it from being square down there, and we are done with the woodwork portion. So let's take another look at it, and still looking good. You'll notice that I left wood at both ends there, and I'll show that in a bit as to why I did that. Now comes what was always the hardest part for me on my first two builds. We have to line up the holes in the trigger mechanism exactly perfectly. Otherwise, it gets really ugly. Well, fortunately, Neptonic sells a guide plate, but when you put that on, make sure that it is flush to the top of the trigger and flush to the back of the trigger. I'm talking exactly flush. And then tape it down and mark the holes. I didn't tape it down the first two times, and it was off just enough that I had a really hard time putting the pins in. So I am taping this down solid, triple checking, and then I'm taking a screw, or rather a nail that I've sharpened, and I'm using that to make a little dimple in there so that I know exactly where the center is. All right, take the trigger mechanism out, and we'll head over to the drill press, put the appropriate size drill in, and make two nice clean holes. I like to use brad point bits. They just make a nice clean hole. And as you can see there, having patience and a little bit of practice, those holes are perfect, lined up just perfectly. Now you're going to sand it because we're getting ready to finish it. Go ahead to use 100, 150, 200 down to 200, 220 grit. You don't want to go any finer than 220 grit because you can actually clog the pores of the teak. Once you've sanded it, I like to take a tack rag, get as much of that dust off as I can, and then after I do that, I'm also going to use some denatured alcohol on a rag, get a little bit more of the dust off, and also take off some of the surface oil so that the teak oil I'm about to apply will soak in. Here's the teak oil. Apply it according to the instructions of the type you get. Generally, you apply it generously and let it soak in about 30 minutes. Wipe that off and then reapply before it dries. And I ended up putting 4 coats on this gun. I didn't finish it with epoxy or polyurethane. Keep it simple. Yes, it's pretty, but it is also going to be a utility gun, so just teak oil it every once in a while. Now I'm measuring the width of it to be sure and cutting the 2 pins that'll hold the trigger in place, and then just rounding them over. You could use a file or just emery cloth to do that. All right, here's all the pieces one last time laid out. That's what we're going to put together next, and we will have a completed spear gun. So we're going to put the line guide in, nice and simple. Make sure that you've drilled pilot holes for everything so that there's no risk of cracking the wood. There's the line anchor. Nice and simple. Use the gun to get it started, but then take a screwdriver to finish it off so that you don't overpower it. Trigger goes in. Now the moment of truth for pins. Looking good so far, and that pin slides right in. In fact, it was so perfect I had to add a little epoxy to it to hold it in place. The second one is just fine, just enough friction that it holds itself in place. Looking good. All right, let's put the trigger guard on this guy. Again, I'll use my drill gun to get it started, and then I'm going to finish it off with hand tightening. Now is not the time to speed things up and crack the wood. Pistol grip. That just goes on with the screwdriver. Nice and simple. There is the shock bungee for the line anchor. That's so that when you shoot your line, and this is what holds the line to the gun, it will stretch a little bit, reducing the shock. Now I'm going to use construction adhesive, marine grade, put it into the butt pad and line it up and set it in place. Once we do that, make sure it's positioned properly, clean up any extra epoxy that leaked out. And then what I do is I will take that, put the butt pad on the ground, make sure that it's exactly how I want it, and then I will clamp it to a post, in this case my workbench, until the epoxy cures. We've got that done. Now let's apply the bands. Here's my kicker band. And we're going to put the wishbone in place using the traditional 2-loop knot, and this way we can adjust it later if we need to. Not quite sure, what size bands I want, so putting in that wishbone that's adjustable, I can adjust it there without actually having to cut the bands if I want to shorten it or even lengthen it a bit. All right, so go ahead and do that to finish up the kicker, and then your 2 main bands, and your bands are done. I'm leaving the cord a little longer, as I said, so that once I test it, I can adjust, cut, and burn the ends as appropriate. We are just about done. Slide the shaft in, put the line on it, and there is our completed spear gun. It took me about 3 days to build, no heavy days. I could have done it in about a day and a half, 2 days, and that's with even letting the teak oil dry and cure. So it's fairly simple once you've done it a couple times, but I think it came out pretty good. Now, I've done some ballast testing, and you can see right there, I've added 11 ounces of lead up front, and I've added 2 ounces in the back. And that's why I left that extra wood in the front and the back. I can also put a reel in the wood I have there, but I left enough wood on there so that I knew that I could drill out the holes and add lead as required. I'm in the pool doing some testing, and this is how we set up the spear gun, traditional way. Lines connected to the spear, go to the line guide, cross over, that's what holds the spear in place. In this case it is double wrapped. Back to the line release, and I'm going to use all 3 bands. So I'm going to load the kicker first on the forward shark fin, and then the other 2 bands on the rear shark fin. Once I've got it loaded up, I'm going to test the balance. I haven't been in the ocean yet, so the ocean will be a little bit more buoyant, but the balance of this is pretty good. It is muzzle heavy, just a little bit like I like it, and I think once I get into salt water, that may be neutrally buoyant or pretty close. Let's take a shot. All right, I've taken about 50 shots with this gun. Once I added the lead, the recoil calmed down very nicely. You can see it floats once you've got the shaft out of it, and that's exactly what you want out of a spear gun. There you have it. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope you got something out of it. Maybe you can use it. But anyway, thanks for watching. I am enjoying retirement.